Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, and welcome to ISPU's webinar, Abortion Legality and American Muslims. Thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule to join us for this webinar today. And thank you to all of our supporters who make American Muslim Poll, as well as all of our other work possible. For those who may not know, ISPU is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, and there are many ways you can join in to help us celebrate. Please visit ispu.org/20years for more information. Today's webinar is the second in a monthly series of webinars diving deep into new research findings from American Muslim Poll 2022. Since 2016, ISPU's American Muslim Poll has captured a snapshot of American Muslim experiences in all their diversity, as well as tracked trends over time. This nationally representative survey provides researchers, policymakers, educators, journalists, and the public insights and analysis into the attitudes and policy preferences of American Muslims. In addition to Jewish Americans, Catholics, Protestants, white evangelicals, the non-affiliated, and the general public. This allows readers to understand American Muslim perspectives within the context of their nation's faith landscape and not as an isolated specimen. This publication serves both to educate the wider society about their Muslim neighbors and to inform Muslims themselves about their strengths and struggles. Today's conversation is just one of the many topics covered. If you missed the first webinar, you can find it on our YouTube channel. Our 2022 American Muslim Poll includes several questions gauging American Muslim opinions about several hot-button issues, policy issues dominating conversations of the day, especially in a midterm election year. We often see national polling data on hot-button issues across faith groups, but those polls don't include Muslims as a breakout group. We are grateful to have had the opportunity to ask about these national topics of conversation in our poll and to provide research on where American Muslims land in their views compared with Americans of other faith and no faith. Research on American Muslim views about hot-button topics is useful to equip work being done by Muslim-led advocacy groups, to equip work being done in partnership with allies or interfaith partners, to provide information about views held in Muslim communities, and more. For today, our topic of focus is one such hot-button issue, the legality of abortion in the United States. The goal of our webinars is always to have important discussions, combining original research with leading expert interpretations, and to equip you, our learning community, to make well-informed decisions. For today's webinar specifically, the goal is to present research about what the public thinks on the legality, not the morality or religious position of this topic, and give voice to those views through our panel discussion. This webinar is not at all meant to be a debate, religious or political. In line with that goal, I will present our original research about the opinions and views American Muslims hold about the legality of abortion in the US, and then we'll discuss the implication of these views with expert legal and health scholars. An important reminder before we get started, ISPU is a nonpartisan research and education organization. Our mission is to provide objective research and education about Americans who are Muslim to support well-informed dialogue and decision-making. Our expertise and focus is not on Islam or Islamic rulings. For questions about the Islamic legal ruling on abortion, we recommend reaching out to a trusted Islamic scholar. Finally, while our scholars may do so, ISPU does not take a position on abortion or any of the other diverse topics we research. We are informing national conversations with research, exactly in line with our mission. So for today's webinar, I will start by telling you all a little bit more about American Muslim poll and its methodology. I'll then share key findings from our research on views about the legality of abortion. And next, I'll invite our panel to join us to discuss those findings. And then we'll wrap up with questions from the audience. American Muslim Poll is a nationally representative survey of American Muslims, Jews, Protestants, white evangelicals, Catholics, non-affiliated, and the general public. Topics that we ask about in American Muslim Poll range from demographics to religious discrimination and Islamophobia to civic engagement, voter suppression, and hot button issues, as well as much more. In terms of the methodology, we partnered with a nationally known polling agency, SSRS. SSRS has done polling for CNN, CBS, ABC, The Washington Post, and American Public Media. Sampling and weighting for the poll is led by Jonathan Best, who's the Vice President for Advanced Scientific Methods. He's also a longtime member and presenter at APOR, the American Association of Public Opinion Research, as well as a member of the American Statistical Association. As I mentioned, it's a nationally representative survey consisting of surveys being done on about 800 Muslims, 350 Jewish Americans, about 200 Catholics, nearly 300 Protestants, 200 white evangelicals, 235 among the non-affiliated. And all participants were given identical surveys, and the survey was fielded between February 22nd and March 21st, 2022. And you can learn more about the methodology of American Muslim Poll at ispu.org/poll. We also had the following expert scholars serve as advisors on American Muslim Poll. Their expertise ranges across topics and methodologies. Before we jump into the topic of today, I also want to mention that the full report was released on August 25th. However, because as I mentioned, our survey covers quite a range of topics, we could not include everything in one report. So please be on the lookout over the next year for future poll topics to be released. And some of these topics include banking while Muslim, who are converts to Islam, the American Muslim family, and volunteering and neighborhood involvement. I'll now present our research on the views held by American Muslims about the legality of abortion in the US. I'll be starting with a few slides to provide some context about faith and public life. In all of the 6 polls we fielded, we asked about the importance of religion. And this year, like all other years, we find that American Muslims are more likely than most other groups to say religion is very important. So in 2022, 70% of Muslims said their religion is very important to their daily life, more than all other groups except 83% among white evangelicals. So Muslims as a whole, with all their diversity and different political leanings, place great importance on religion in their lives. Interestingly, how that religiosity or faith plays out, varies for different faith communities. In 2019, we charted where different faith groups land on the spectrum of private versus public religiosity. We found that white evangelicals are most likely to be both publicly and privately religious. Protestants were medium-high in public engagement and high on private religiosity. Jewish Americans were high on public religiosity, but lower on private engagement. Catholics were medium-low on both, and Muslims were medium-low on public religiosity and high on private engagement. Private religious engagement included things like deriving meaning and purpose from one's faith, and drawing on faith to forgive after being deeply hurt by others. Public religiosity, on the other hand, included items like taking an unpopular stand to defend one's faith, or wishing to use faith as a source of US law, which we'll discuss further. So to summarize, Muslims are among the highest on measures of private spirituality, but tend to be a bit lower on measures that require public risk. One of those measures of public religiosity that we asked about in 2019 included a question about respondents' opinion about sources for US law, with the options of your religion should be the main source of American law, your religion should be a source of American law, but not the only source, and your religion should not be a source of American law. We found that white evangelicals were most likely to say their religion should be a source of American law at 71%, with 17% saying it should be the main source and 54% saying it should be some source. So that's depicted in the dark blue and the medium blue bars to the left. And Muslims were more split, with 45% saying it should be a source, including 12% saying it should be the only source and 33% saying some source. 51% of Muslims said their religion should not be a source of US law. So what these initial slides show is that while most American Muslims find religion to be very important in their daily lives, fewer assert their religious beliefs as state policy. And now that we have some context, we can jump into the 2022 findings on about abortion legality. So what we found is that among Muslims, we find that a very slight majority, 56%, or roughly half, favor abortion being legal in all or most cases, as depicted in the orange bars. This is on par with Catholics, of whom 55% say abortion should be legal in all or most cases, and the general public, where 62% say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. The 56% of Muslims is comprised of about 1/4 who say abortion should be legal in all cases, and about 1/3 who say it should be legal in most cases. Among Protestants, a very slight majority, or again, roughly half, 54%, are of the opinion that abortion should be illegal in all or most cases, while 46% say it should be legal in all or most cases. The groups most likely to say abortion should be legal in all or most cases include the non-affiliated at 85% and Jewish Americans at 75%, which are both significantly higher than the percent among American Muslims. 4 out of 5 white evangelicals believe that abortion should be illegal in all or most cases, more likely than all other groups surveyed. So in the previous slide, we saw that Protestants and white evangelicals were the groups with more than 50% in favor of having abortion be illegal in all or most cases. Diving deeper, we find that a smaller percent among these groups, or more of a minority opinion among these groups, is that abortion should be illegal in all cases. Among Protestants, 20% say it should be illegal in all cases, and 35% say it should be illegal in most cases. Among white evangelicals, 37% hold the opinion that abortion should be illegal in all cases, and 43% say it should be illegal in most cases. A smaller proportion of other groups say that abortion should be illegal in all cases. So, and this is shown in the orange bars in the graph. So among Muslims, it's 16% say abortion should be illegal in all cases. Among Catholics, 11%, 8% of Jewish Americans, and 3% of the non-affiliated. Focusing in particular on American Muslims, we find that Muslim men and women are mostly on par in their views about the legality of abortion. Specifically, about 1/4 of both Muslim men and Muslim women think abortion should be legal in all cases, as shown in the dark or navy blue section of the bar. Roughly 1/3 say abortion should be legal in most cases, which is shown in the medium blue. Another 1/4 of Muslim men and Muslim women say abortion should be illegal in most cases, shown in light blue. Where there is a difference is in the percent who say abortion should be illegal in all cases. In this instance, Muslim men are more likely than Muslim women to hold this view, which is shown in purple. So 19% of Muslim men think that abortion should be illegal in all cases, compared with 11% of Muslim women. Similar to gender, we find that for the most part, Muslims of all ages hold similar views about the legality of abortion. Muslims of all ages are equally likely to hold the opinion that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. 60% of 18 to 29-year-olds, 56% of 30 to 49-year-olds, and 52% of those age 50 or older. However, when it comes to the opinion that abortion should be legal in all cases, we find that younger Muslims are more likely than the oldest Muslims to hold this view. So 27% of both 18 to 29-year-old and 30 to 49-year-old Muslims hold the view that abortion should be legal in all cases, compared with 15% of Muslims age 50 or older, as shown in the dark blue bars. Among the general public, however, younger people were more likely than older people to support the legality of abortion in all or most cases. 79% of 18 to 29-year-olds, 64% of 30 to 49-year-olds, and 52% of those age 50 or older. Nearly 4 in 10 18 to 29-year-olds in the general public think abortion should be legal in all cases, more likely than 27% of 30 to 49-year-olds and 20% of those age 50 or older. Comparing age cohorts between Muslims and the general public, we find that younger Muslims age 18 to 29 were less likely than young people in the general public to hold the view that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. When we look at abortion views by race and ethnicity, we find that Black Muslims are less likely than Asian or Arab Muslims to say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. White, Asian, and Arab Muslims are on par in their view that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. So 56%, 67%, and 66% respectively, while 48% of Black Muslims. Among the general public, however, there are no racial differences between Americans who are Black, white, and Hispanic in their view that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. Black Muslims are on par with Black Americans in the general public in their opinion that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. There is no difference between Muslims. Finally, there's no difference between Muslims who are born in the faith and those who are born into another faith in their view that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. So now that I've provided some context as well as the research about views on the legality of abortion, I want to wrap up the presentation with some research from 2020 that gets at how these views, some of the implication or the impact of these views. In 2020, we asked a series of questions asking about whether respondents would support their faith community forming political coalitions with various activist groups. Just as we found that the community is split about the legality of abortion, We also found that Muslims are split in their support of coalition building with pro-life activists. So we see that 47% support such coalition building. And we know that when it comes to the legality of abortion in the US, the topic of religious liberty becomes an important part of the conversation. In 2020, we found that Muslims and white evangelicals were the most likely faith groups to support building coalitions on religious liberty issues. Though at 49% and 53% respectively, we do see a fairly even divide within these communities on this issue. Finally, in 2020, we used linear regression to identify predictors of coalition support among Muslims. We found that political leanings and not religious practice predict coalition support among Muslims. When it comes to being in support of faith communities building coalitions with pro-life activists, being a Democrat predicted lower support for such a coalition, while factors such as gender, age, income, and religious practice made no difference. So what we learned from all of this is that among Muslims, views on the legality of abortion may not be defined by someone's views about the morality of it. So at this time, I'll stop sharing my screen and invite our panelists to join us. I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Abed Awad. He's a founding partner of Awad and Khoury LLP, located in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey. His practice in the New Jersey, New York area focuses on complex matrimonial law, estate planning, including Sharia compliant estate planning, and the Islamic law of inheritance, Islamic law and business law. Awad is AV rated by Martindale and is a fellow of the International Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers. Awad has native fluency in Arabic and is an international expert in Islamic law and the laws of the Middle East. We also have Asma Uddin. She is a fellow at the Religion and Society program at the Aspen Institute. She is also a visiting law professor at Catholic University. Asma is a religious liberty lawyer and a scholar working for the protection of religious expression for people of all faiths in the US and abroad. She is an active lecturer to diverse religious groups in the US and overseas on the importance of religious liberty, and she's widely published on the topic, including 2 books, When Islam is Not a Religion, published in 2019, and The Politics of Vulnerability, published in 2021. Finally, we have Dr. Ghada Khan, who has nearly 15 years of experience as a public health professional, researcher, and educator with special expertise in community-based participatory approaches, collective impact, women's health, maternal and child health, sexual and reproductive health and rights. Through a demonstrated history of working in government, nonprofit, and academia at state, federal, and international levels, she has developed a wide range of competencies spanning nonprofit leadership, quantitative and qualitative research, monitoring and evaluation, data analysis, and translating research into action. Dr. Khan holds a doctor in public health degree from the George Washington University School of Public Health and received her master's of public health degree from George Mason University. Throughout her career and within her personal capacity, Dr. Khan has been dedicated to the empowerment of vulnerable populations and communities and addressing health inequity. In recognition of her work, Dr. Khan has received the Global Woman Award from the Global Women's Peace Foundation, the Women's Rights and Gender Equality Award, and from the Global Women's Institute. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'll start with Abed. Outside of the morality of abortion, roughly half of American Muslims believe abortion should be legal in all or most cases. How should American Muslims look at the legality of abortion, and is there an urgency for that view in our society today?
Thank you very much, Erum, for moderating and for inviting me to participate in this discussion. And thanks to ISPU for your pioneering and visionary work. I mean, results of this particular poll were quite revealing to me, and I value the knowledge output from ISPU. I believe there is serious and urgent issues for this community relating to religious liberty on the issue of a woman's right to terminate her pregnancy and control her healthcare, reproductive healthcare rights. I think a moral context, a Sharia moral context is important here, is from the Sharia perspective. The issue of a woman's right to terminate her pregnancy revolved around whether a fetus is a life. And based on the Quran and the prophetic tradition, the issue turned on the issue of when a fetus is ensouled, which all scholars have agreed based on the Quran and the Hadith that it's 120 days. So prior to 120 days, the issue of terminating your pregnancy from a moral Muslim perspective was either permitted regardless of reason, or permitted based on necessity and good valid reason. So from a Muslim perspective, this issue is private. It has never been an issue that the government or the state authorities in an Islamic society governed a woman's rights. It's an issue between her and God, and even the termination did not violate any criminal laws of any sort. So with that particular context, the pluralistic nature of the Sharia reflects on the way the community functions. We function based on that there is no monopoly over divine will. There's no monopoly over truth. There is pluralistic legal system, communitarian driven, that is 1,300 years old. With that context, it is not surprising that for 56% of Muslim Americans support the woman's right to terminate her pregnancy and control her reproductive health. Now, where's the urgency here? The urgency here is that if I'm Muslim, female, living in Texas, in Alabama, or one of the other 20 states that prohibits me from terminating my pregnancy, and I have a genuinely, sincerely held religious belief based on my communication, my private communication with my scholar, with me reading my own religious text, that I have the right to terminate my pregnancy prior to 120 days. And this is theologically permitted. And this is my religious right to decide. I am now banned and prohibited from exercising my religious right to control my reproductive health. So for me, the banning and the overturning of Roe v. Wade has direct impact on a Muslim woman and a Muslim couple who have these religious right to determine when life begins and whether the fetus can be terminated, and it's within their theological parameters. Now I am prohibited to do so. So this is a legal urgency to protect the religious liberty and the protection of the rights of Muslim American women around the country. So yes, this is really problematic, and I think it impacts many religiously competent and pious Muslim American women in the country.
Thank you so much for shedding light on that point of view. I'll now turn to Asma. Only 16% of American Muslims believe that abortion should be illegal in all cases, and 26% believe it should be illegal in most cases. Can you share where this position comes from, and if you believe there are situations where there should be an exception, and what does that mean for religious freedom in this country?
Sure, and thank you for having me here today. Thank you to those who have joined the discussion. And I just wanted to note that I do need to leave a bit early today, so if I happen to disappear at some point from the conversation, that is a reason. So as you noted, 16% of American Muslims say that abortion should be illegal in all cases, and 26% think it should be illegal in most cases. Those numbers are actually pretty close to where the broader American public falls on this question. The Pew Research Forum has been doing studies since 1995 through to 2022, and has found that actually where the sort of the percentages fall in terms of different positions has actually remained pretty stable throughout that entire period. So 37% of the American public say that it should be illegal in all or most cases. So that's versus 42% in the American Muslim context. And more to the point, that when you kind of think of like the two sort of outer limits, legal in all cases, illegal in all cases, again, there's like very small numbers of even the American public that kind of falls on those sort of outer parameters. And the vast majority of them actually fall in the middle. A third say that having an abortion is morally wrong in most cases, and 24% think that it should be morally acceptable in most cases. So really kind of talking about this sort of middle space here in between the outer limits. And in terms of giving voice to those who among American Muslims kind of fall closer to the prohibition part of the spectrum, I mean, again, this is largely speculative. I can only sort of think about what might be some of the reasons why American Muslims feel this way, the 26% that I'm referring to. And I would guess that at least partly it has to do with theology, whether that be something that's sort of at the forefront of the way that we think about these questions, or whether it became the background of the way we think about them. I think all of us have some range in which we sort of contemplate or the broader sort of purpose of life and of our existence. Theology kind of plays that role in terms of our conception of our place in this world, our duties to God, and so on. Interestingly, Justice Kennedy in the Casey case, which was the one that essentially upheld Roe, said this in support of broad abortion rights. He said, "At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of universe, and of the mystery of human life." And I think very much those who oppose abortion in many cases can say the same thing, that very much where they're coming from is their own conceptions of their existence and their place in this world. More specifically, Abed had mentioned the Islamic legal position. So I think we have theology as sort of like a bigger concept, related to our bigger conception of life and the purpose of life. But then we have the benefit of Islamic law and Islamic schools of thought that actually kind of pinpoint it. And Professor Asma Qureshi recently summed up the diversity of views on this in this way. She said, different Islamic schools of thought have different rules on whether and when one can have an abortion. Among them are that abortion is permissible through the first 120 days, right? So that's 16 to 17 weeks of pregnancy. Abortion is permissible, but discouraged up to 40, some say 80 days after conception. And then the third position is that abortion is prohibited, even at the point of essentially right after conception, unless there is a compelling reason, such as risk to the life or the health of the mother. And that exception of dire circumstances is actually present with respect to all the other timelines as well. So even if we passed, even for those who put the cutoff at 120 days, if the mother's life is at risk, an abortion would be permissible past the 120-day point as well. And I think that's important to understand here. We're not talking about situations in which the mother's life or health is at serious risk. We're talking about abortion in context outside of that. So you have this variation between position. Some schools say, or some scholars would say right after conception, others say 40 days, others say 80 days. And then I think the outermost, and the one that Abed mentioned as well, is 120 days. So let's take that, and then I'll talk about abortion bans in the context of American society and in the post-Dobbs world. What exactly did Dobbs do? Dobbs overruled Roe and Casey. That was another case, essentially, again, upheld Roe's broad protection for abortion. And Roe and Casey, again, sort of set the limit at 22 to 24 weeks. That it was essentially viability was the point at which abortion would be prohibited or more strictly regulated. And so if you say Roe and Casey is 22 to 24 weeks, anything that is less than that, such as the Mississippi law that was at issue in Dobbs, which limited it at 15 weeks, would have been a violation of what at that time was understood as a constitutional right to an abortion. And so the New York Times has a sort of handy list of kind of where abortion bans or abortion laws in the United States are right now. And so you have the states that are protecting either the Roe line at 22 weeks, or actually further expanding those protections such that there actually are no gestational limits on abortion. Okay, so we can kind of put those in the 22 plus weeks category. And then those who are enacting bans are anywhere from conception to 6 weeks. And there's a set of states who are banning it at the 15, 18, and 20 week mark. And so if you kind of match this up against the Islamic law that I just mentioned, the most permissive being 120 weeks, which is 120 days, which is 16 to 17 weeks, we would kind of, just on the basis of that Islamic law, kind of fall on the side of those who are enacting some sort of modest ban on abortion. I mean, just purely, if you just sort of show like a number or week to week comparison, you'll see that we actually kind of fall more on that side. And so I think that, I think when we talk about the extent to which abortion should be limited, I think you really kind of have to think about the 40-week pregnancy and just determine what are we defining as most abortions should be illegal? At which point are we drawing the line? And I think anything 120 days and less would be considered illegal. It should be a position where someone would say that it should be illegal in most or all cases. I think beyond this, I think there's also sort of broader moral questions about what abortion might mean in our sort of current context. A Guttmacher Institute and the Guttmacher Institute supports broad reproductive rights. And it did this study where it kind of looked at what were the reasons that women who got abortions got them. And it found that about 74% of women said that they got an abortion because having a baby would dramatically change my life. And 73% that I said that also had the concerns about sort of these financial concerns. I can't afford a baby now. And I think these sorts of reasons, again, very distinct from questions of extreme risks to a woman's life or health, make, I think, as I speculate again, the American Muslims who feel that there should be limitations on abortion. I think there's something about sort of this reasoning for ending life or potential life that they might find to be not to be a very good reason, or they might have qualms about it. And then I would also venture to guess, especially in our current context, I think questions about sexuality are something that people have, sort of a perennial concern that people have concerns about where society draws those lines. I think in our time right now, there are huge questions going around that a lot of people are sort of talking about and concerned about, related to questions of gender fluidity, sexuality, responsibilities and rights, and where the boundary should be. And I think there might be some concern that abortion is sort of playing into this bigger question and maybe tied up with issues that might make us, that we might have sort of some questions or concerns about. Areas of sort of the gender and sexuality conversation that we might find to be progressive in a more sort of radical way. Finally, on this religious issue as to whether or not, there was lots of discussion that I saw online and elsewhere where Muslims and Jews and others who sort of identify as religious minorities or people who have religious concerns that are different from conservative Christians. There was this idea that, well, our religion holds something different, and so we should have, this is a violation of our religious freedom, and we should have a religious freedom claim to challenge these abortion bans. And so I think it's important to kind of look at, one, again, the sort of the spectrum, right? That the different types of bans that are being enacted, whether they be 15 or 18 or 20 weeks. And then of course, there's a six-week bans and the fetal personhood laws. But if you kind of think about the Muslim position, sort of most permissive position being the 16 to 17 week cutoff, then I think in some of these states where you have abortion bans being enacted, again, at the 15, 18, 20 week point, that I think you don't have any sort of religious challenge there because it sort of lines up with that pretty well. In the case where there is a more permissive position in Islam than what is being protected by the state, we can kind of think through what a religious freedom challenge would look like. I think some people kind of think of it as a religious veto, because we have different religious positions in relation to what the state is trying to enact, that we should essentially be able to sort of stop the enactment of that or veto that law. And that's not how religious freedom works. What's the way that it would work in this context would be that the state could enact the law, and then a Muslim claimant could say, well, you need to make an exception for me. There needs to be some sort of religious exemption or an accommodation for me because my religious views are in conflict with what this law requires. And so I think to that end, the first question is, okay, when you bring a claim like this, you actually have to show not that your religion permits something that the law is prohibiting, because there's many different things that religious law permits or is silent on that our secular law prohibits, right? I mean, our religious law doesn't say anything about speed limits or whether we can own a fully automatic rifle, and yet the state is allowed to create secular regulations. So you can't just say that my religion permits something. You have to actually say that my religion requires me to get an abortion. And that is something that you, the state, are stopping me from exercising. So assuming you can show a requirement, what would that look like in the Islamic context? It might be that we say that Islamic law requires us to allow the woman to have an abortion in the case where my life is at risk. But again, most of these states, even the ones with very serious restrictions, tend to accept that, yes, if a woman's life is at risk, then she can have an abortion. So there might not be a conflict there to begin with. There might be plausible to kind of think about a religious requirement that is beyond that, sort of like requires us to sort of consider broader health exceptions for the pregnant woman. So assuming you can make that claim that less than the most dire circumstances, my religion requires me to have this abortion. Not permits me, but again, requires me to have this abortion. Assuming you can make that claim, then the standard that the government would have to meet is the strict scrutiny standard, which requires it to show that has a compelling government interest in stopping you from getting an abortion. And in the states where there are abortion bans, the government would argue that it does have a compelling government interest because there is life or potential life that it is trying to save. And it would most likely marshal the secular sort of evidences about sort of like the formation of the fetus at that point and how closely it looks to a fully formed human. And so assuming the government can meet that standard, then the government would win. But if the government can somehow not show that it has a compelling interest in stopping you from having an abortion, then the government would lose and the religious claimant would win. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asma, for that very thorough and thoughtful response and for providing that insight. We'll now sort of switch from a legal perspective to a health perspective. And to that, we turn to Dr. Ghada Khan. Dr. Khan, abortion is seen as a women's issue, often discussed from a moral and legal position. What are the health implications of this conversation, and what is the work that American Muslim health-focused organizations are doing around this topic?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Erum, for having me. And I also would like to thank ISPU for including this very important question in the national survey, which really gave us a good idea of how our community feels about this very contentious topic. It is indeed a hot topic. So yes, we know that abortion is a gendered issue and it's highly stigmatized within different communities. So it's really important to understand the health perspective and the reality of what's occurring on the ground when it comes to abortion access. We know that women undergo abortion for various reasons, as stated previously, including both unplanned or planned pregnancies. And the clinical term abortion also includes a wide range of procedures that are done to terminate both viable and non-viable and high-risk pregnancies. So from a health perspective, abortion is an essential healthcare issue. In going over the health implications of legal restrictions, we can't separate also the discussion from the moral and faith imperative to keep women safe and healthy and ensure the well-being of families. So let's consider these health issues that arise when legal and safe abortions are banned. We know that in this case, it will force many women to face the known risks that come with self-managed abortions. And we've already been seeing this in states where abortions are banned, and we're seeing this on the ground. And those who are privileged to seek care in other states will do so, and those underprivileged take the risk of those that self-managed care. And the question is, how equitable is this? When choice is also eliminated through these stricter laws and bans that are proposed, we see that women are forced to enter a pregnancy with pre-existing health conditions that put them at a higher risk of morbidity and death. Women also are forced to continue going through pregnancies with pregnancy-related complications in place. For example, if a woman is having an ectopic pregnancy, she's sometimes forced to go through that pregnancy, even though the outcome is a non-viable birth and a non-viable pregnancy, just because these complications are gonna, even though these complications are gonna put them at a higher risk, but the procedure itself is gonna be criminalized and they don't have access to abortion care and the abortion procedure itself. We also know that the psychological impacts of carrying an unplanned or high pregnancy to term are not considered within these bans. And since we're currently in suicide prevention months, it's important to note that we know that perinatal suicide in many places is the leading cause of maternal mortality. We also know that these outcomes of injury and harm and death will disproportionately affect historically disadvantaged communities who already face structural and systemic barriers to accessing healthcare, including women of color and women living in rural or low-income areas. We know that our country here, the US, already lags behind its peers in maternal mortality, and that many reproductive health and stricter abortion laws will make the situation worse, especially among Black women who die from pregnancy-related causes at nearly 3 times the rate of white women. We know that equitable healthcare should remain a right for all and not for a privileged few. From a legal standpoint, we see that the criminalization of abortion-related healthcare is making healthcare providers also hesitant to provide, hesitant and unable to provide life-saving interventions when needed, putting them in a position where they have to base their decisions on legal liability, which shouldn't be a consideration at all. Doctors, healthcare providers have sworn an oath to take care of their patients, but abortion bans are forcing them to choose between providing life-saving care and avoiding criminal charges. And that's where healthcare providers in general are seeing much needed support. And this is a case, whether it is a case of saving a woman who is undergoing a botched abortion or saving a woman from a high-risk pregnancy. These abortion bans play out the same from a legal perspective for healthcare providers. We also know that the criminalization will also result in increased surveillance and unjust criminalization of women of color in particular, who also face surveillance from other aspects, within other aspects of their lives. And the last thing any woman would want to go through after ending a pregnancy, whether it was planned or unplanned, is being prosecuted as a result. So with this context in mind, we need to recognize that a woman's views on abortion are ultimately determined by her own values and should be determined by her own beliefs and her own life circumstances. And such critical healthcare decisions should remain in the control of patients in consensus with their healthcare providers, because this is the type of relationship that comes with this health issue. And within the sanctity of this individual choice on reproductive health and patient-provider relationship, there's no there should be no room for government interference or the imposition of personal religious views. I know that it was alluded to that different states have different levels of abortion bans, and this is also something that needs to be taken into consideration. But we also know that on Tuesday, congressional Republicans did introduce a bill to ban abortions nationwide, and that's something we as healthcare providers, and particularly Muslim healthcare providers, need to consider. And it's also ironic that in the call to ban abortions in many of the states that are currently moving towards this law, these states also aren't expanding Medicaid, which essentially ensure access to things like contraception and reproductive and preconception care that would help us avoid all these situations or actually remedy some of these cases. So, and we also know that even when abortion is legal, many women of color can't afford it. So in states where abortion is indeed legal and there is this issue of choice, women need to travel hundreds of miles to get to clinics, or they don't have access to the proper care. There's really no choice where there's no access. As American Muslim health professionals, we're called on by our faith to contribute and continue to advocate for an equity-centered approach and a public health strategy that protects a woman's right to exercise personal choice, champion equitable access to reproductive care, regardless of race, socioeconomic status, or place of residence. And in that way, we find ourselves opposing this government interference and hoping to leave this choice to women themselves and healthcare providers themselves. And that's where we see other organizations that are healthcare focused. This is a similar position that we find other healthcare organizations in. Just to ensure and protect the health of all and the well-being of all Americans.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khan, for shedding light on some of those implications and the perspective of American Muslim health professionals. At this time, we'll now take questions from the audience. Just a reminder to our participants and our audience to please use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit your questions. So there's a question on, was the economic or social group of the interviewees looked at? So I can respond to that because it relates to the ISPU survey. So our survey includes people of all different socioeconomic status. And the data on this topic in particular, we did not break it down by economic or social group. We have a question about how many people would you think would actually join an activist group, whether Muslim or non-Muslim? And Abed, I think you signaled to take that question.
No, I did not. I may have done
Okay.
that mistake, but
Okay.
I'm happy to answer it if need be. So I don't. There are, Muslim Americans are a very diverse community in the United States. We have, our religiosity goes from non-observant to perfectly observant and everything in between. And we're integrated. We're part of the fabric of American culture. I was born in this country, raised in this country. So we become integrated and we get involved with Democratic Party, Republican Party. We get involved with not-for-profits. So yes, there are going to be Muslims who are going to join groups because they strongly believe in a particular position, whether it is to defend a woman's right to terminate her pregnancy or, taking a position that, the pro-life position and active and organized. It's not surprising. It is only normal and organic that we are active in all aspects of American civil society.
Thank you so much for that. There's a question from Mona Kafil, Executive Director of the Texas Muslim Women's Foundation. She asks, as an agency serving survivors of domestic violence, how do we navigate the intersection of domestic violence and abortion? Being in Texas, I believe we are held liable for any resources we provide. And I'll ask Dr. Ghada to please comment on this.
I'm not really familiar with the liability issues when it comes to the intersection of domestic violence and abortion, but I do recognize that this is another issue that comes into play when we are considering abortion cases and how domestic violence impedes on these issues, or also creates a situation where abortions are needed. And so, but in terms of the actual liabilities and navigating the legal component of that, I unfortunately am not familiar with that. And so I wouldn't want to touch that area if it does have legal implications for the organization. But I would also give a shout out to the Texas Women's Foundation for the great work they're doing in this space.
Asma or Abed, would you like to comment on from a legal perspective?
I'm not familiar with the Texas law. I mean, I did review when it was unfolding. I think maybe Asma, this is in her space, she may have a more precise answer. I don't know.
Yes, unfortunately, I can't answer that as well.
Okay, thank you so much. So at this time, I do want to mention that there was also a comment in the chat box, kind of alluding a bit to what Asma was saying about the diversity of views on the Islamic position about Sharia. And again, we do ask for people, if they have questions about the Islamic perspective, to please contact your local or trusted Islamic scholar for that. Let's see, we're getting some more questions in. And this is more of a comment. We have a comment saying, I collected signatures in Dearborn, Michigan for a proposal to enshrine access to abortion in our Constitution. I had a few people decline, but most Muslims signed it very enthusiastically. Some folks, thinking I might be surprised, basically said there's no hope prohibition in Islam. I assume that the Muslim folks who sign may be like the Catholics who sign. Abed, do you have a perspective on this?
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the comment really is saying, it highlights the diversity of opinion of American Muslims about, their views about the morality, but also the legal perspective. So I think your point about we're coming at it from multiple contexts, from our understanding of the religious perspective, as well as the fact that we've grown up here, we hold certain views. And so the comment was really about how some Muslims would be very eager to sign a proposal, enshrining access to abortion in the Constitution.
In prohibiting, in enshrining.
Yeah, enshrining
Absolutely.
the right.
See, the thing is that, I mean, one of our attendees, Mr. Ismail Royer, he's putting comments about that I'm mischaracterizing the position of the Sharia on abortion. Unfortunately, is he's citing resources and statutes, treatises that take the position that even from conception that abortion would be prohibited. And all I'm explaining is what everybody misses the point about the Sharia and the mischaracterization. The Sharia as an epistemology that produces knowledge is fixated on the nuance. It is not an absolutist. So Ibn Aqil, the 12th century, permitted a Muslim woman to take medicine to abort her term and to terminate prior to 120 days. Yes, there are other scholars, they say it's prohibited from conception. Our position is not taking one position on abortion versus another, but rather laying out the diversity of opinions and explaining that the Sharia has never been state law. Even the scholars who prohibited at 80 days, if you terminate it, it's a personal decision you make. It would not be criminal. You're not a criminal that's going to jail. The diversity of opinions is what matters here. And that is reflected in the Muslim American community. So why is it that we're going to take a position that the Hanafi school said is prohibited after 80 days, and that becomes the mainstream absolute position? That's not the Sharia. The Sharia says, if you subscribe to that particular school of law, you should be bound by that position. But if you do not subscribe to that school of law and you subscribe to another scholar that permits it under 120 days, you should be permitted to exercise your religious right and do it. So the diversity is in the community here is the same diversity that made the Sharia so sophisticated and able to adapt to all socioeconomic circumstances, geographic areas. The Maliki school in Muslim Andalus was different than the school that was in Damascus.
Thank you so much.
That's our diversity.
Thank you so much, Abed. And I think that the main response to the comment about the signatures is that reflection of the diversity. I want to thank our audience for joining us. Thank you so much to our thoughtful panelists. I really appreciate you joining us today and being thoughtful in your responses. Thank you to all of everybody who attended today for investing your afternoon with us. Your feedback is so important to us. Please take a few minutes to fill out the poll that is appearing on your screen right now. A link to the research is shared in the chat and will also be emailed in a follow-up email. And just a reminder that we have more webinars in our series coming up, and they will also be sent in an email. But please mark your calendar for October 13th at 12 p.m. for a presentation on civic engagement, and on November 3rd at 3 p.m. for a presentation about views on climate change. Finally, if you're in Michigan, join us for a fun family day picnic at Three Cedars Farm this Saturday, September 17th, as part of our 20th anniversary celebration. Again, please look out for our follow-up email. Thank you so much for joining. Assalamu alaikum.